Ty, just so you know, your screen's only like half on, like it's not full screen. I don't know if that's something with
Yeah,
your
it's
phone.
it's just like wait, is it like
Recording
here?
in
Oh, there you go.
progress.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Very
Recording
cool.
in progress. God.
Does
Ty, are you
everyone
being
hear that
considerate
too?
for your neighbors?
Yeah.
That way you're not in the
Uh,
studio?
Break out the broom.
Yeah.
No, well, also Caroline is sleeping, so
Oh.
Yeah, it's not like super late for you or
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so going into prompt one, so one of the main words to describe this 2024 Mariners season is disappointing. They finished with a 85-77 record. They had a few less wins than they did in 2023. Would you say this season was more or less disappointing than the 2023 season? We'll go with whoever's to my right, which looks like it's Jay. You can start for your opinion on that one.
Oh boy, great! I get to start off. No, I would definitely say this season was more disappointing than 2023 to me. One, there was less wins than 23, and I was kind of willing in 2023 to look at it and go, "Hey, they took maybe a brief step back before taking that next step forward." And then to see them kind of just take another step back overall in 2024 made it more disappointing. And then when you factor in having a 10-game lead in June, and then truthfully getting the last couple weeks of the season and kind of knowing they weren't going to win the division, for me overall, I think 2024 does seem more disappointing than 23.
Okay, moving on to Colton.
Yeah, so I think that Lyle put it best when I talked to him at one of the last games. He said that all the inertia from 2022 is gone. Anything that came from the playoffs in 22, everyone was like, pretty psyched going into 2023. And obviously, in the end, the Mariners didn't make it, missed it out by like a game or so. And then going into 2024, people were bummed, sure, but then they were like, okay, cool, another year. Daisy says hello. Another year. But after this year, losing the 10-game lead to the Astros, I can't honestly think of a more disappointing year in recent memory for me specifically. And I think I speak for all of us here. This year was incredibly draining for content creators as a whole. And just the expectations that we had on some of the guys that we signed and like the offense that we thought was being put out there compared to what it ended up being was incredibly hard to watch. So yeah, I'd say 2024 was way more disappointing than 23.
Okay, now to the other half of the Mojo guys, Joe.
Yeah, I think a lot of like conversations we've had around this season is how it's been some of like the most draining like time watching and like covering the team. I don't know if I was necessarily as drained as Colton was necessarily. I don't know if my emotions were as tied to it, but just like from an objective like standpoint, I think this season was more disappointing than 2023. I think you can kind of compare like big acquisitions in the offseason and look at like who was worse between Teo and Garver by like a landslide. And then I guess like Wong versus Polanco, but like I think the like landslide that is created from Garver compared to Teo outweighs like whatever like I guess you gained back from Polanco versus Wong, and just like how much better the pitching staff was and like how everyone kind of took steps forward for the most part. Just being able to watch that night in, night out and it not really amount to anything was pretty disappointing to say the least. So I think I don't know if we're going to get someone that says 2023 was more than disappointing than 24, honestly.
Okay, yeah, we'll move on to Colby then.
Yeah, most of the people have already hit on it. I mean, you blew a 10-game lead, and it only took you a month to do it. So that's pretty darn disappointing. But for me, the cherry on top that just puts 2024 over the top of 2023 is that this team, even after they blew the lead, they still had a shot to make the playoffs, and they got the help they needed. Like along the way, they got the help they needed. A couple wildcard teams had bad losing streaks. You just never really took advantage. You climbed your way back to within one game, and you were the first team out because the Twins collapsed harder than you did. So cool, I guess. But I think, I think the 10-game lead is bad enough, but then you stack on top of it the fact that they had a legit shot to still make the playoffs, and they missed out by a game. Again, it is I think 5th time in the last 10 years they've missed the playoffs by one single game, or they were eliminated on game 161. Well, not technically, but you guys know what I'm saying. So it's this year. It's incredibly disappointing. And despite all of it, if you had won the game on June 7th against the Kansas City Royals, in which you led 8-0, you would have been in the playoffs. That's all it took, one blown lead. And you missed the playoffs because of it. You could also point to the 2 Yankee games you blew. with two of the dumbest base running decisions we've ever seen, like in the history of baseball. Point to all of it. One game is one game, and you can point to any one game you want. But it's just incredibly disappointing that they were right there again. And once again, they fell short. And it just feels like it's a never ending like dream that we're in where, yeah, the Mariners, they're probably going to get to the last weekend of the series. They're probably going to have a shot. They're probably going to come up short. That's just what they do. So this year just keeps on stacking on top of all the disappointment of every other year. So this year was more disappointing than 2023.
Colby, I'll just add one quick thing before the next person goes on that. 1-8 in your final 9 against the Angels. You can chalk that up too. If you're looking at losses that should have been wins, 1-8. I know they're not the White Sox, but they're not that far off.
Yep. Moving on to Ty.
Yeah, I don't really know what else you can say other than, I mean, look, it was the step back to the step back, right? Like, and had you made the playoffs this year, you could look at 2023 as more of just kind of an outlier. Like, just some things didn't go your way, and unfortunately, you didn't make the playoffs, and but this year you got things back on track, and while you did waste some really good things in 2023, like a career year from JP Crawford, for example, I felt like you even wasted more this year. Obviously, you can start with the rotation, the great year that Cal had, Victor Robles turning into essentially an all-star since coming over to the Mariners. And I think what's really disappointing is just the overall inconsistencies throughout the team, right? The inconsistencies of the offense as a whole, the inconsistencies in Julio's season, the inconsistencies in the home road splits for the rotation, all of that. And then, obviously we didn't get to see what this bullpen could look like at full strength. I think that's really maybe one of the more underrated, disappointing aspects of this year is just like, you never got to see what this bullpen looked like at full strength with, Santos and Brash and Munoz rolling. And so that obviously put some of those, guys like Trent Thornton and Austin Voth and Ryan Stanek in positions that you probably didn't want them in. And that also, helped you, or rather did not help you late in games. So, I would just kind of summarize it as, how I started this whole thing. It was the step back to the step back of 2023.
For sure. And we'll move on to Lyle.
Well, maybe this is my cue to stop talking to Colton because Colton took all the points right out of my mouth when he talked. But yeah, I would say the same thing. All the momentum you had from 2022 is now gone. In 2021, you win 90 games and everybody feels like we are right on the doorstep. We're right there. 2022, they win 90 again. This time they get in. Look, they should have done more in 23. But sometimes that'll happen, right? Where we've been prone to seeing bad luck go the Mariners' way over the 20-year drought that they were in, where they'd win X amount of games, but it just happened to be a good field that year where they'd miss the playoffs with 86, 87, 88 wins, whatever it's been in some years. 2023, they should have done more. They should have done more at that deadline, but in the end, they still won 88 games. And in a lot of years, this year, for example, it would have gotten you in, but it didn't. That happens sometimes where you hope, okay, they missed it this year. You bounce back in 24. No, they did not bounce back in 24. For 4.5 months, the offense was, as we all know, abysmal. Despite getting the help they needed, they still only win 85 games. Obviously, guys go down with injuries. And, what honestly puts the cherry on top of all of it for me, because it was draining. Like, to Colton's point, this is as drained as I've ever been watching a Mariners season. There have been some bad years. For where the expectations were paired to where they finished the year, I've never been so drained watching a season. And to just cap it all off, right after the season ends, after game 162, I say to myself, it's finally over. I'm going to relax. I'm going to reset. I'm going to take some time off, only for the next day to have an article come out where the owners say, oh, you know how we can win some brownie points with fans? Let's actually tell them we're going to be transparent and tell everybody, well, we're not going to spend it all this offseason on any free agents or any top end free agents because that's actually not a smart strategy. So less than 24 hours into what was supposed to be a relaxing offseason, then we get that and I start spiraling again. So man, maybe my energy level's too high for this. I don't know. But here we are. To cap this all off, yeah, 2024 was more disappointing than 23. It was way more than 23 for me, especially when you add all that stuff at the end. So yeah.
To add on to that, I think it is just a gift that keeps on giving, right? We think that we have some time. We've been watching a great postseason over the weeks, then we get the news about playing injury the whole time. It's like, cool, great, really glad hear about, like, can't we just go like a week without having to hear something stupid from this baseball
Yeah.
team?
For real. It's
Yep.
like, yeah, getting on that Monday show, doing our mailbag, and it's like, all right, well, let's get into our off season, schedule for content. We got the Jerry media gathering, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't a press conference. We can talk about that. And then, oh yeah, here's an article from Adam Jude. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Awesome.
John Stanton is tragically bad with the media. Tragically bad.
Oh, like when I saw
Read
the
the
article,
room.
when I didn't even read it right away. And
Didn't need to.
yeah, and I was like, all right, no, this is going to be some stuff. Yeah.
So
Yep.
I had just, I had wrapped up with an early morning show that day. And obviously, like a lot of the times when you get up at 4 a.m., you're kind of ready to sometimes fall asleep in the afternoon. I was getting ready to do that. That article comes out, and forget the nap, because I just start seeing red right after that article comes out. I was like, are you kidding me with this?
John Stanton is
we're-
your sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah, it is. I mean, not even 24 hours after the final out of that final game, and we see that. It's like, like Colby said, I don't know what goes through their heads when they give some of these quotes. Like, are they really thinking to themselves, we're actually going to win over fans with our transparency with this? I would have rather them just said nothing and then let us be mad in January when they don't do anything, rather than setting our expectations in October for this.
Yeah.
Ty and I had an idea where they should say, like, very publicly that they're going to go after Juan Soto this offseason, even if they didn't have a single like bone in their body where they wanted to do that, just so that they could put it out there like, hey, we offered him $400 million, because that might actually buy you something with the fan base.
Yeah.
Like,
Way
why
more.
just
it
not even
blows my
allow
mind.
yourself to have that fallback where it's like, well, we tried.
Yeah,
Instead,
it
you come
blows
out the
my
day
mind
after
that
the offseason and say, like, we're not even gonna try. Like,
it blows my mind that they allowed that report to come out that they balked at the Ohtani money.
Yeah, that was so
Like,
dumb.
I feel like the proper PR management of that would be like, no, we put out an offer. We definitely put out an offer. Like, we like Shohei Ohtani. Like, we like
feel
good
made a
baseball
very
players.
aggressive offer.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to say.
At least say we kicked the tires. That covers your bases.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Said they come out and they said, we shot out the tires. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How can you be this bad at this?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, Ty mentioned him at one point. We're going to talk about Julio specifically in this one. The franchise cornerstone had a bit of a down year in 2024. It still was a 2020 season, but still ended up slashing 273, 325, 409 for a 116 WRC plus. Just not nearly as much production as we're used to for him. Obviously, he did have an injury, but just, even before then, he was having a rough time at the plate. So where should expectations be for Julio going into 2025, and what are some things we might be looking for to kind of signify him taking that next step in his career next year as well? So I guess we'll start with Lyle. You can go first on this one.
Yeah, we'll see where I set the floor here, if I end up being on the low man or kind of in the middle with this. But what we've seen at this point over the last 2 years from Julio is a guy who's been buoyed a lot more by months rather than seasons. We've seen him get red hot, and we've seen him be ice cold for better parts of each of the last two first halves. So honestly, look, I hope I'm wrong about this, because we know the guy's going to play great defense. We know he can steal bases, but if we're talking about what he's going to do with his bat, I think my expectation next year is he's going to be a 115-ish WRC plus hitter, be 2020 about the floor and play good defense. That's about a 4-win year, at least what he did this year. But until he does this consistently over a longer period of time, like he did in 22, it's hard for me to say, oh, I feel good about the fact he's going to be a 130 guy heading into 2025, because we've just seen too many long stretches of time where he just has not been that guy. So, he'll have a good year. I don't think he's going to hit 180 or anything like that. But yeah, if you were to ask me where I think he'll be in 25, I'd say my bar is about 115 WRC plus.
Okay. We'll move on to some of the Mojo guys. So go ahead, Joe. You're up next.
Whoa, I thought it was just gonna go reverse order here, but we're jumping across.
That's what I
jumping around the
realized
board.
last night when I kept doing clockwise, counterclockwise. I'm like, some people are waiting forever to talk again, so I'll randomize a little bit.
Well, I'm glad that you've switched it up. Yeah, I don't think the like that's an unreasonable floor sitting at like a 115 WRC plus 2020 season, whatever. Like the thing that you're looking at is his slug has just gone down since his rookie season, like every year. And obviously this year was a tremendous drop off compared to the drop off from 22 to 23. I think, and if there's one, I guess, non-disappointing factor from the 2024 season, everybody that wanted Edgar Martinez in and say Scott Service out kind of a situation, I'm sure there's people that are ringing that bell like crazy. If Edgar's still with the team in some capacity, I think that maybe what we saw out of Julio the last month could be, I guess, like extended for more than a singular month. And that's like, I guess, me coping. I would put it a little bit above this season. I think that even working through that ankle sprain, like that injury at the end of the year, and still being able to put up such a hot stretch at the end of the year shows a lot of resolve in Julio. And whether or not there was outside things influencing earlier on in the year, like with his down season to begin, and then he continues to get hot as the summer months go on. I just have to, at some point, like there's going to have to be some sort of like Turner corned. Whoa, corner turned. Turner corned is crazy. That's crazy, guys. Whoa. We're going to need to see that happen, and we haven't yet. So it's like in the 4th year, entering his age 24 season, like how much more time are we willing to give him? I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, like again this year, and say that like he'll put up closer to like a 125 WRC plus, like more so like the 2023 season. But I don't know if we'll see like an MVP top 5 finish until like that is truly extended. Like that level of play, like in August in 23 and September in 24, like that level of play is extended for at least 3 months. Because if not, like there's just going to be guys that are always going to be ahead of him that he'll never be able to catch up to.
Okay, we'll move on to Colton then.
So I think that my expectations and everyone's expectations should be sky high, because that is what Julio welcomes. That is what the Mariners have welcomed. And frankly, what choice do we have but to be optimistic in our guy whose floor is probably Randy Arozarena with better defense. Like his floor at the plate is probably Randy Arozarena with better, and then he's better defensively. I think that he's only 23. You know, generally guys get to their prime at like 26, 27, you know, somewhere in there. So he's got some time. And with the lineup around him, I have no reason, I guess, to think that Julio is going to be bad again next year, other than the fact that he continues to prove it every single year that maybe he's not the guy that we thought he was at the end of 22 when they signed him to that extension. I think that Julio Rodriguez, until we know for sure, we have to have expectations that he's going to be a 130 to 140 perennial all-star, perennial MVP candidate, because that's what he's signed to do. And he clearly has the potential to do it. Like we can see pretty clearly in those months of August or September or whatnot, that he has the potential to be everything you want and more. We just haven't seen it for a sustained period of time. I think that as he goes into another offseason after a disappointing season, maybe he looks at it as there's something to do with the way he prepares for, you know, next year. Maybe he does something differently there. I don't know. But if he's able to get in there with Edgar and figure out, okay, here's what I was doing wrong last offseason to prepare for this year. Because once he found his groove, he was great. Like after he came back from the injury, it just took a long time. I think the expectations still should be sky high with him, because frankly, he can be that person. He absolutely can. He just has not been able to do it for a sustained period of time.
Okay, we'll move on to Jay.
Yeah, I thought Colton hit the nail on the head with the age thing. Still 23 years old. Still, I think the world of Julio. I still think he can be an MVP for this team down the road. And listen, even this year, he finishes, I think, with a 3.8 wins above replacement level for F4. The thing I think was like still 56 in baseball, including pitchers and position players. So still a pretty solid season. For me, and I think everyone's talked about it a little bit, it's the consistency. I think at the All-Star break, or maybe a little bit before, he had like an 85 WRC plus. He does not have to be September Julio or 2023 August Julio every month. If he did that, I mean, he's the greatest baseball player of all time. We don't need him to be that, but he's just got to find that consistent. We can't have those 70 WRC plus months and just those moments where there's times we watch Julio and it's like, oh my gosh, those at-bats are just atrocious. Like what's happening then a week later, it's like the guy can't make it out. I mean, it's just, you just go up and be like, yeah, well, Julio's getting on base right here. So just finding a little bit of that middle ground. And I have no idea how to do that. I'm not an expert on baseball coaching. I'm hoping maybe a full season of Edgar Martinez will help with that. Maybe Dan Wilson's got something he can do with that'll help. I don't know. It's just something I'm hoping for. Maybe it's not even a coaching thing. Maybe it's just some players are streaky. And obviously he's not going to, I'm not saying if his WRC plus is 120, it's got to be 120 every month. Every player has good streaks and cold streaks, and then that's going to happen. But I think it's just making those cold streaks a little less cold and a little bit closer to a league average hitter. If he can do that, I mean, I think you still have, I mean, what was he, 7th in F4 last season in 2023 in baseball? I mean, do you think you can have an MVP on your hands? But he's got to show it on the field. But I still believe in Julio, and I still, I won't put MVP expectations on him next year, but I still believe that is in him, and that it wouldn't shock me if he's the AL MVP next year. It really wouldn't.
Okay. We'll move on to Ty then.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the last point that Jay made there, that like the expectations going into 2025 probably should change from what maybe they were in 2024 or going into 2024, 2023, et cetera, where, all right, this is the year. He's going to be an 8-win, 9-win, 10-win player. He's going to, contend for the AL MVP. But I also don't think that we should overcorrect either, because as we've seen, when he gets hot, he can be that guy. He absolutely is that guy. So we know that's in there. And that absolutely, I mean, not like August Julio, but that absolutely can be carried over a longer duration of a season, right? That can be carried over for a full year, right? Because we know that he's going to give you plus center field defense. That is the second most valuable position on the field, third. So there's going to be a heavy premium placed upon that. And we know that he can be a 130, 135, 140 WRC plus guy. Like, we saw the floor this year. Now, can he have a year that looks overall worse if he, like, for example, misses more time with an injury? Sure. But he cratered in the first half. He was terrible, not just for Julio standards. He was bad. He had, 5 extra base hits in the first 6-7 weeks of the season, or 5 doubles rather, in the first 6-7 weeks of the season. That's just, I forget who mentioned it, but it was like an 85 WRC plus or something around like, early on. Like, that to me is as bad as it's going to get. And at the end of it, he still was basically a 4-1 player. He still was a 2020 guy. He was still about a 117 WRC plus. I think that's where he ended up. So that to me is still, like, we have seen what the worst of Julio can look like. And I just don't think that's who he is. I refuse to believe that's who he is, or even close to who he is and who he's going to wind up being. So does he end up, or would more realistic expectations be like, all right, he's going to be like a 120, 125 WRC plus guy? Yeah, absolutely. Like, he's going to be like a 5-win player, a 6-win player, rather than like he's going to be in the MVP conversation. Sure, totally. But I think that should always be, at the very least, in the back of our minds, that can happen, because it is very, very, very much possible, especially early on in his career. It can just happen at any given moment. So, yeah.
Okay, and moving on to Colby.
Yeah, obviously a lot of talk about Julio's great September, but he was pretty darn good long before September rolled around. From July 1st until the end of the year, he hit 312, 364, 528. That's a 158 WRC plus. And we can sit here and say, like, oh, that must be heavily reliant on the September he had. Well, if you look at what he did between July and when Edgar got to town, his numbers are still very, very good. Over that time span, he hit my internet has stopped working. Am I sounding good still?
Yeah,
like, I'm
you're
still
good.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, you're
sound
fine.
good
Yeah, you're
enough.
fine.
All right. Numbers pulling up here. So in that time period from July 1st until the day Edgar was hired, his first day, Julio hit 299, 365, 494, 152 WRC plus. So it wasn't just that Julio had a great September. He had figured something out in early July. Now he missed the 3 weeks there in August. So his overall numbers, I mean, who knows? Maybe he just continues that and his numbers look a lot better at the end of the year, or maybe he goes through one of those mini slumps again and the numbers look worse. Who really knows? But the point is that from July 1 until the end of the year, Julio was the guy that we think he can be. He was the 158 WRC plus guy. He was that high 150 guy. And, the defense, a little tough to judge him this year. He played half of the second half with post, high ankle sprain. So it's a little tough to judge, but he still looked pretty darn good. So for me, my expectations for Julio are what they are. and that is that Julio Rodriguez needs to be a 135, 140 WRC plus guy who's, stealing 25, 30 bags, hitting 30 home runs. He needs to be a 6.5, 7 win guy. And I think there's nothing wrong with expecting that from him because he has that talent. We know he does. His talent is not up for debate. It is there. We've seen it. And in this last year, we saw it for more than a month. Last year, we kind of saw it for 1 month, unfortunately. And in his rookie year, he was great for the last 5 months. He struggled in the first month and he was great after that. So everybody's right. We have to see a more consistent Julio. And Julio's kind of the perfect microcosm of the Mariners offense as a whole. We look at the numbers at the end of the year and we say, oh, the Mariners offense, they finished 12th in WRC plus. That's not bad. Well, yeah, but it's because they finished third over the last 6 weeks and they were 20th in the, or 24th or whatever in the previous 10 weeks, 12 weeks. So there has to be some consistency there. For me, what I'm looking for from Julio, I'm not a swing guy. I'm not going to be sitting here studying his hands or anything like that. I'm watching the at-bats, and it's very easy to tell when Julio is locked in and when he's not. Just aside from, he's hitting the ball 110 miles an hour every night. Like, okay, that's easy to tell. It's the pitches that he chooses to swing at, right? It's the slider away, which has given him troubles. He won't lay off of it when he's really struggling. And it's the velocity in. He's got to lay off that running two-seamer in off the plate. And when he chases those two pitches, he has no shot. And when he's trying to figure things out and he's not exactly cratered, he'll take that fastball middle in and he'll just flip it into right field, right? Those are the pitches that he has to hunt and he has to destroy. And when he's going good, that's what he does. So that's what I'm watching for Julio next year. But my expectations aren't changing for Julio. I like, he has to be that guy. And if he's not, he's a disappointing player, regardless of how much we love him. He has to be that guy. That's on him to get there. I'm not changing my bar. I'm not lowering my bar so that Julio can hit it. Julio has to get to my bar. And that's incredibly selfish of me as a fan. I get that. And maybe delusional, but I don't care. I don't. You want to be the superstar of a franchise, the face of a franchise.
Breaking news, everybody. Colby doesn't care.
You want to be the face of the franchise? Like, you want to be the guy or one of the faces of Major League Baseball? Get there. And if you're not going to get there, then you kind of got to tone it down a little bit. You got to shut up a little bit. So, the one thing I'll say about Julio, we did see some growth towards the end of the year. He made that horrific base running decision or mistake, whatever you want to call it, against the Yankees. And it's the first time I remember him meeting with the media and answering questions with the media after he had a bad game. And that is the type of stuff that he has to do. Because if you're going to struggle a little bit on the field, you have to take more on your plate on the off the field stuff. So I'm still all in on Julio being a superstar. My expectations are not going to change. And like everybody's already mentioned, he's 24 years old. He's got time. So I'm not changing my expectations. I don't think any Mariner fan should lower their expectations for Julio. Stop lowering expectations for the Mariners. Raise them. Meet them. Okay. Even though it won't make a difference because there's nothing you can do about Julio hitting a slider. Nothing we can do, right?
We've tried.
That's where I'm at.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to the next one. A few days ago, Jeff Passan broke the news that Jorge Polanco underwent surgery on the patellar tendon in his knee. The hope is he'll be back for spring training, but that sounds like a hopeful timeline. It's probably going to be a bit longer than that. This injury does explain a bit of his production decrease last year. Ended up slashing upon the whole year, 213, 296, 355 for a 92 WRC plus. The Mariners are faced with either picking up or declining a $12 million club option for the 2025 season. So where are you at with picking up the option for Polanco? And if not, what is your solution for second base going into 2025? This time we'll start with Jay again.
Yeah. So boy, on the spot right away. I'm going to still say no on the Polanco option. I'm still the injury thing certainly does make me say, okay, could get a bounce back, but it could just be some chronic issues that are happening with Jorge Polanco. He's had some injury issues in the past. I mean, listen, if you can go in there and say, hey, we know for a fact this is why he struggled, we 100% believe he's going to bounce back out. There's no way to know that. But if, people that know more than me, on the inside of the organization feel that, I can understand it. But you've already got a ton of money tied into Mitch Haniger for next year, giving $12 million to Polanco with what we know this team's budget is already going to be, just makes me concerned going in next year with Jorge Polanco. So I'm still probably a no on the option. Now, there's not a lot of great options behind him. I like Ryan Bliss. I'm not fully sold on Ryan Bliss playing 162 games. I mean, you could potentially do something where you get and I'm sure we're going to talk about third base options. I think Ty and Colby mentioned Alec Boehm the other day. I think that'd be a great option, not to get ahead of ourselves. And you could do something where you're like platoon, Polanco, or sorry, Bliss and Rojas second. So there are ways to work around it. Gavin Lux is a name that I think would be interesting if he's available. I don't know, but if you're trying to offload some contracts, Dodgers are a team to take the money, so you can work out something there maybe. I'm just going to say no on Polanco. It is somewhat tempting. I can totally see him going somewhere else, bouncing back, and you know the reactions are going to be on that with not bringing him back. But right now, I'll stand up and I'll say no on the Polanco option.
Okay, we'll move on to Lyle.
Something tells me I actually might be in the minority here with this. I'm bringing him back if it's me. Look, I know $12 million is a little hefty. Here's my counter. Number one, he essentially has to be a 1.5 win player to earn that money next year. And I know his defense isn't great, which is going to take down his WAR period throughout the course of a season. But so there's two sides to look at how this injury and this report of the injury goes moving forward. You can either say, look, the guy's just injury prone. I wouldn't risk paying him $12 million. We're going to move on. Or you say, well, he was playing a lot of the year injured. Let's take the chance and the hope that he's more healthy in 2025 and roll with it. And the reason I'd go with the latter is basically, what are your options going forward? Unless you go trade for Brandon Lau, I don't know how this position gets upgraded, because you're either going to, if you look at the free agents, there's Gleyber Torres, there's Ahmed Rosario, or if you're not going to sign free agents, which is a pretty common theme of this organization, then it comes to guys that are in-house, which is going to be some turnstile of Leo Rivas, Ryan Bliss. If you move Rojas to second, Rojas, Dylan Moore, and once he's ready, Cole Young. And look, I like Cole Young. I think he could be a really good 9-hitter long-term for this team. He's a great bat-to-ball guy, but I don't think he's going to be ready by opening day. And even if he's up in 2025, I have a hard time saying at 22 years old, he's going to be a 100, even 105 WRC plus hitter. And for a team that's trying to tell their fans, yeah, we're competing for a World Series, you're going to run some turnstile of guys out there at second base. If it's up to me, I'd take the chance on Polanco, who, by the way, had a 114 WRC plus in the second half. I know a lot of that was buoyed by July, but I'd take the chance and say, this is our highest ceiling guy in terms of guys we could plug, or in terms of guys we could play at second base. I'd roll with it.
Okay, we'll move on to Colbin.
Me or Colby? Me?
No, Colbin. Colton.
Oh, that's me. Okay, got it.
Colby and Colton did the fusion dance. Fusion.
So I think it's a tough question because, like Lyle said, he doesn't have to be spectacular to be worth $12 million next year. In terms of how much, I think that if you look at a couple years ago at Jorge Polanco, you say he is absolutely worth $12 million. With that being said, I mean, he's on the wrong side of 30 now. He's a guy that we saw. His at-bats were so frustrating this year to watch. It's something that I find very, very difficult to say yes to. And also when we get to our under the radar trade targets, you'll understand. But I say no. Because we'll be acquiring a second baseman later. But I think that
Foreshadowing's crazy.
he's a guy that it's possible. I don't know if you decline his option, if he'd be willing to come back for cheaper. I kind of doubt it. And he's also a guy that I think next year he goes somewhere else. It almost feels written in pen that he will have a better year next year and be a guy that you probably could have used on this baseball team. But the risk, in my opinion, is too high for $12 million. That he could be bad. He could be 2024 Jorge Polanco. And if that's the case, you shot yourself in the foot because you didn't go out there and try to upgrade to second base. You looked at that guy and said, yep, that's the guy we're going to roll with. And come to find out, maybe the knee didn't heal right. We don't even know if he'll be ready for opening day. He should be, but maybe he's not. And if he's not, then you're paying this guy $12 million to be on the injured list for you. There's too many variables with Jorge Polanco moving forward. Not to say that, the guys in house are the right option. I do think they need to go acquire a guy like we'll talk about later. And I think that because of that, the Mariners should decline his option, 5 days after the World Series, and then figure it out from there. And if you circle back, if you try to make all these moves and come to find out none of these guys are available and Jorge Polanco's still sitting out there on the free agent market, then maybe you take a shot and say, hey, would you come back for 8? Would you come back for 10? He probably tells you no. And he probably goes somewhere else and has a great year. But at least you gave yourself the option instead of basically just picking up Jorge Polanco and just saying he's the guy next year. You have to leave the door open to get better at that position.
Okay. We'll move on to Cole B. Yes.
First of all, 80 great teases there, Colton.
Sorry. That was a Discord joke that Colton seemed to forget and didn't play into at all.
I forget every time I've ever spoken to you, Jake. Who are you?
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
That's what you want to hear. So yeah, my thing with Polanco is heck no, not if he wanted to play for free. No, the real issue with Polanco is obviously there's a number at which Polanco makes sense. There's a number where just about everybody makes sense. $12 million is not that number. And what people seem to not be factoring in here is that it's typically, now we don't know the extent of the injury. We don't know how severe it was. He's able to play through it. So that would lead us to believe that it wasn't like a complete tear or anything like that, but we don't know. And typically the recovery time for this is 6 months. So 6 months from today, we're a couple weeks into the season. And that's for him to be ready to do what? Ready to play baseball games, ready to get into his off-season work. How much work is this guy going to be able to do in the off-season as he's rehabbing from this? Like, how much time is he going to spend in the cages as he's rehabbing from a knee issue that, you know, he's going to be in a brace and he's not even going to be allowed to put full weight on his foot, on his leg for like the first month after the surgery. Like, how does that impact his preparation? On top of all of that, this is a guy, Polanco, in 2022, he missed 58 games. 2023, he missed 81 games or 82 games. And, you know, this last year, he missed 44 games. Like, this guy's not a picture of health. He's had lower leg issues before. Last year was the hammy. So, you know, it's a lot of concern here for a guy who didn't really perform. He was pretty good at times, but overall he wasn't good enough. The knee might explain that, but am I going to take the shot that just wipes away everything? No, because I think I can spend that $12 million more effectively. The question is who plays second base? And there's not a great answer, because I look at it and I say, who's most likely to be the opening day second baseman for the Mariners next year? It's Cole Young is the answer. And that's not a great answer. Like, obviously, if you're trying to sell yourself as a World Series contender, you know, it's not ideal to have rookies. Now, the Padres had Jackson Merrill start center field opening day for them. Like, is it impossible to have rookies and, you know, and be a World Series and not be a World Series team? You can have rookies and be a World Series team. Absolutely, you can. Is Cole Young ready? I don't know. He had a very encouraging year at AA, considering he was 20 most of the year, 21. The youngest hitter in the Texas League for most of the season. He had a very encouraging season. I think he is a high floor major leaguer. I think he can do roughly what Polanco did at the plate last year, which was just a 92 WRC plus. But even if he's an 85, with his defense alone, he will be more valuable than Jorge Polanco. So it sucks. Like, there's not a lot out there. We know this. And the Mariners are already going to have to try and figure out what to do at third base. Like, there's already 2 holes in the infield. And we're not even talking about first base, which may or may not be Luke Raley. They didn't really want to commit to Raley being the first baseman, or is he part of the outfield mix, or is he the DH? Like, I don't know. So there's a lot of question marks up in the air, and it would be great if Jorge Polanco could be the answer to one of them. I don't think he can be. I would rather have the $12 million, especially since I can't count on my owner to cut more checks that I want to cash. I have to kind of, you know, count my pennies. That $12 million on a guy who may or may not even be ready to begin baseball activities until the middle of spring training, that's way too big of a risk for me. If he wants to come back at, you know, $3, $4, $5 million with a bunch of incentives for playtime, we can have a conversation about that. But that's a conversation I can have in January, and I can take the next 3 months to try and figure out, like, what are we going to do? Like, what's our plan here? And is Cole Young ready? And if we don't think he's even ready for a shot, then we got to go out and we got to find somebody else. Maybe that somebody else is just Josh Rojas, which again is also not ideal. So it's a no for me. I'm not interested. There's too many injuries over the last few years for this guy. The $12 million is way too much. And just from a pure baseball value standpoint, for Cole Young to be worth as much as Jorge Polanco was to you last year, he's got to be like a 75 WRC plus. Like, that's it. So I would rather take the shot on Cole Young being more than that than pay $12 million to a guy who may or may not be ready by opening day and is coming off a bad year with a history of leg injuries. Now, I'm out. Like, I'm out on Polanco. As much as I want to be in on him, I was huge on the Polanco trade. Loved it. Would do it again. honestly. Similar player, similar package, would do it again. It just didn't work out. And I'm not basically foregoing the opportunity to improve for fear that I might not. I'm taking the shot and I'm going to use that money elsewhere.
Okay, we'll move on to Ty.
Yeah, I mean, all right. Giving Jorge Polanco $12 million, even given the the news about the injury and the struggles this year, is fine in a vacuum, but unfortunately these things don't work in a vacuum. John Stanton is your owner. We don't know how much money this front office truly has, especially in terms of new money, right? Because if you pick up Polanco's option, you're already going to be over where you finished this past year at when you factor in all the arbitration guys that you for sure know that you're going to pick up, and accounting for at least a couple of the other guys, like, maybe they pick up Josh Rojas, or they pick up Trent Thornton and Austin Voth, et cetera, right? So how much more money do they have after that, right? So for me, it's like, again, factoring all of this that we know about Polanco, the injury history, this new injury, how that might impact his offseason preparation and his timeline. Is he, like, I think he's the better option, but is he $12 million better than Cole Young? Is he $8-ish million better than Josh Rojas? Like, just as an option, given everything that we know, I'm not sure. The answer to me is I'm not sure. And again, I have other things that I need to address, and that's going to at least cost some money. Now, can I cut some corners in areas and maybe pick up a guy that's on the league minimum or close to that to play, first base for me? Sure, maybe. But I need as much flexibility as possible. And if Polanco is going to significantly hamper that, then I'm out, because patella tendon injuries, and again, we don't know the severity of it, but patella tendon injuries are pretty serious. They're typically more serious than like ACL, MCL, stuff like that. It's an injury that I'm more familiar with regards to football than baseball. But I've seen multiple athletes just not look like the same guy after a patella tendon injury. And again, this isn't the only injury Polo has suffered in recent years. So what is he going to look like? Again, it's going to at least cut into some of his off-season preparation, like how he would normally do it if he were healthy. And what is he going to look like by the time that he's ready to participate in baseball activities and actually play in games? And when is that actually going to happen? Because look, that report from Jeff Passan, that read a lot like it came from Polo's camp, right? And for a guy that is more likely than not heading into free agency, heading into a year that he's going to turn 32 years old at in July, they're going to want to spin a more optimistic outlook to prospective teams that are going to look to sign him. And yeah, it's going to be a limited market, and there aren't going to be many options, and that's not just a Mariners exclusive issue. But there's a lot of question marks surrounding Jorge Polanco, and it's possible that he ends up being one of these guys whose free agency lingers later on into the winter, potentially into spring training, potentially into the regular season. We've seen that happen with a couple of guys who didn't even have as many question marks as Jorge Polanco does right now. So I think it's absolutely, at the very least, something that you can circle back on. I'm not concerned about running out of options, and then by the time that I decide I want to circle back on Polanco, he's gone. I'm not really concerned about that happening. So, but $12 million, it's a very simple no, because of all the stuff that I just laid out. There's just too many variables to account for.
Okay, moving on to Joe.
I very much so agree with the no camp. I think that a lot of the red flags are just like they weigh too heavily, I think, for what the value you're going to get out of $12 million is. I will play devil's advocate slightly in the favor of maybe those who will say yes, in the fact that the way that the article is laid out, it seems like, because the phrasing at the very beginning is like he expects to be ready for the very beginning of spring training. And the way that his season played, he got better in the second half, like pretty exclusively. Like OPS is by month 604, 572, 474, reaches his bottom there, and then he gets back up on his feet to 783, and then it comes back down a little bit to 693 in August, and then 631 in September for OPS. Like, it's not great. I mean, he only had one singular month worth an OPS over 700, and I don't know if that's necessarily something you're willing to risk on a guy that has, as Colby kind of mentioned, like has missed time in the last 3 years pretty extensively, played through a pretty, I guess, like nagging knee injury this year where I don't know how bad it was really if he's playing through it and playing 120 games and he's getting better as the season goes on. Maybe he's just kind of like learning how to deal with like the pain and like learning how to play around it more. But the value you're going to get out of $12 million given to him versus like trying to spend it elsewhere, I just think you can get more out of that situation. And like if you decline it and you're saying like circling back, like Ty was saying, how Colton was saying too, like you can try that. I just don't know if one, like how that will kind of like sour the relationship if it does, like if they decline it and then he's like, oh, so now you want me back for this amount of money. Like I think it's no, and I just think he's going to go on to like, I guess like the grass is greener for him elsewhere next year in 2025. Like I don't see him returning personally.
All right, let me just ask this one question. I guess, well, Colby kind of gave his answer, but I'm just curious from everybody else because I was the only person in the yes camp. So would you guys, if you're going to move on from Polo, are you okay with the in-house solutions or do you want to go get somebody outside the org? Because like you guys are smart. Maybe you already know this, but I'll just throw it out there anyway. Josh Rojas from May 15 and on had a 555 OPS. Like, I don't love the idea of running that guy out at second base. Rivas and Bliss are not proven. I don't like the idea of Dylan Moore at one position. I've got bad nightmares about what second base could look like if you move on.
I think the simple answer to that, and it's something that we won't know what it looks like, is what else did you do? Right? Is that something that you can eat? Can you eat having Ryan Bliss start the year at second base? Can you eat having Cole Young start the year at second base?
Right.
Or, Rojas start it there until you feel Young is ready, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think it depends on what else you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's as simple as that.
Fair.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone else feels any differently.
I don't think that they can leave any stone unturned into figuring out how to put a competent second baseman and somebody competent over at third base as well. Even if they fill both second and third base, I think Rojas is best suited on the bench, in my opinion. He should not be starting every day. Maybe the left-hand side of a platoon, but I think that when you look at around the infield, I mean, again, Joe and I have talked about this. Like even JP shouldn't necessarily be safe in 2025. Not to say that he hasn't earned like the benefit of the doubt going forward, but they have to look at every single avenue, whether that be a trade, whether that be a free agent, whether that be in-house, and whether that even be Jorge Polanco. They have to analyze everything and decide what they think is best, because if they get it wrong, like they're screwed, frankly. Like if they get it wrong, this whole front office is probably gutted next year. And I would think, and I'm not going to say that. I mean, obviously we have no idea what kind of contract Jerry Dipoto and Justin Holland are under at this point, because for some reason they didn't announce anything. But knowing where things are headed and how poor this offense was in 2024, I want to say it can't get worse, but I feel like that's setting up for like a bad baseball takes thing. So I don't want to do that.
Exposed.
Yeah, old takes exposed. So I don't want to do that, but they have to go out there. They should not. Plan A should not be in-house options. Plan A should be going out and acquiring somebody, whether it be via trade or via free agency.
Yeah, I'll throw out a name that shouldn't cost a ton of money that we know they've had interest in multiple times. That's Ahmed Rosario. Now you would have to platoon him, but could a platoon of Ahmed Rosario and Cole Young work, or a platoon of Josh Rojas and Ahmed Rosario work? Maybe. So that's just something that, again, he's probably going to cost $4 million ish, if I had to guess. Maybe that's something where you invest at least a little bit of money into it, but it's another guy that's not like, you're not really like swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
But it's at least a bridge. It's another option to be a bridge to whatever else is next.
Sure. Yeah, just to wrap this up, I think my thing is I like what Cole Young has the potential to be. I just don't love the idea of sticking him as your opening day second baseman because you have no other options. I'd love to see them have something in place until he's ready, so you don't have to force him into the role.
Agreed.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. The starting rotation was elite last year for the Mariners. They threw 92 quality starts, and I would urge you not to look up how many of those we won. The offense is clearly what needs to be upgraded most this winter, but it's been discussed due to the cheap ownership that we may need to leverage one of our starting pitchers in a trade to get a good bat back. Do you think that will happen this winter? And if so, who do you think is most likely to go? We will start with Ty on this one.
Well, I think the easiest one, or the easiest pill to swallow here, would be trading Luis Castillo, because there's obviously, again, conversation about money, which rules every conversation surrounding this team. So, but on that front, you have to make a lot of assumptions, like how many teams are going to be interested. Are those going to be the same teams that he would actually waive his no trade clause for? Would he waive his no trade clause for any team? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How much money are they going to take? Are they going to be willing to give you something that's actually of value on top of taking on the money? All that stuff. But if the answer is yes on a couple of those things, then I think that's the way to go about it, because again, it kind of, for lack of a better term, it kills two birds with one stone, right? It frees up some flexibility for you payroll wise, and it potentially helps you address something on your roster. To me, though, and we've talked about this on the show and a lot, Colby and I just don't know if you're actually going to be able to get proper value for any of your pitchers right now, because we're talking about multiple years of club control at more than reasonable prices for all of these guys, right? Logan less than the others, but Logan still has 3 years left. It is not often that you see a starting pitcher of Logan Gilbert's caliber get traded, right? So there isn't even really much of a comp to make, right? So what does that ultimately look like? And it's a very small needle to thread, in my opinion. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I don't know exactly what makes sense on that front. And then with George Kirby, what pitcher of the magnitude of George Kirby has been traded with 4 years left of club control? And then with Bryce Miller and Brian Wu, again, like when Ryan Divish has talked about this, about the possibility of trading one of these pitchers or multiple of them, he's talked about it from the perspective of, well, they're going to get more expensive, right? So again, money dominates this conversation. And with Wu and Miller, those guys are incredibly important to you, especially over the next couple of years, because at the moment, they're both pre-arb right now. So that doesn't really make sense, because especially if you're going to trade Gilbert or Kirby, maybe it's not this year, but it's next year or the year after, Miller and Wu are very valuable to you. So and it's just, again, what are you going to get for those guys? Especially for Miller, who's now kind of starting to, I don't think he's fully there yet, but we started to see the transformation into an actual complete pitcher. And he found himself in some really good company this year with the stuff that he was doing. Like, what does that look like for 5 years of that guy? What are teams going to be willing to give you for that? And is that actually proper value? So it's just a really difficult conversation. I don't know if I necessarily would be surprised if they traded any of the starting pitchers. I have no idea what it looks like. And I know people throw out like the young Orioles players and all that. I mean, one thought that I've had is, like, does Logan Gilbert for Ketel Marte make sense? Maybe. But again, like, even when I'm able to kind of talk myself into an idea, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. It's a really complicated situation. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they did it, because it does seem like one of the likeliest paths to add impact, since they're not like real actual impact, because they're not going to spend the money necessary to get those big time free agents. But I just have no idea what it would look like.
Okay, we'll move on to Joseph.
I think like the caveat is just like trying to free up money to then allow the impact to like be felt as far as like the players that you're adding. Like the only one that makes sense to trade in terms of like freeing up capital, like Ty was saying, like the money rules everything, is like it's Castillo. At the end of the day, I don't think a trade happens from the starting rotation. Like, truth be told, I really don't see like something kind of coming together in a way that makes sense for like what value you're really going to get out of it. But the one that does make the most sense, I think, just in general, is Castillo, because of the money he's owed personally. If there was a trade out of like starting pitching, I don't think it's going to be from the core five. I'd say like you're more likely to trade like an Emerson Hancock, and then allow someone to step into your number like 6, like the backup guy, like Logan Evans steps into that role, Michael Morales steps into that role, maybe Brandon Garcia is ready, or you trade one of those prospects to a team that feels like they're a year away, that they can let them develop, and you get some sort of guy that's a year away on the offensive side, like however that kind of works. But again, that's not really like the conversation. It's more so about the 5 starting pitchers that you're going to be rolling out there one every 5 days and like how they impact the team. I just don't think that they're going to find a trade of value that they like, and kind of similar to how they ended the 2023 offseason of like, oh, nothing really formulated for Wu and Miller. We're glad we didn't trade them. I think we're going to have a similar conversation at the end of the 2024 offseason about trades around the starting rotation just in general.
Okay. Colby, your turn.
Yeah. I don't think a trade happens with the rotation. I wouldn't be shocked if it did. You can't rule out anything with Jerry. He's nothing if not creative. My bigger concern than everything Ty laid out there with, can you get proper value for any of your 4 young guys? Like, can you find a team that has the financial resources to absorb Luis Castillo's contract and the prospects that make sense, or the young major leaguers that make sense for you to trade that guy? There might be 1 or 2 teams like that, but it's only one or 2, right? It's not like there's 15 in that market. And then you have to factor in Castillo's no trade clause. So while Castillo is the most likely to be dealt, he's also the hardest one to find a buyer for. So that, muddies the waters a little bit. But my main concern here is not, well, it is a little bit, but secondary concern. Let's put it that way. Who are you replacing Luis Castillo with? Because the strength of this team is pitching. It's going to be pitching. Like, you are never going to have a juggernaut offense at T-Mobile Park. It's not going to happen. No, forget it. Like, your goal is to be consistently above average offensively and to pitch your tails off. And by the way, you get into the playoffs, that's the formula that's going to win it for you too. So you want that formula. Who is going to replace Luis Castillo? Because the only way I can see this working is if you take the money that you freed up trading Luis Castillo, and now you're going and you're spending it on what? A starting pitcher. You do not have his replacement in the minors. It is not Emerson Hancock. Dude is trash. Okay. He is a number 6 starter, number 5 starter. He was worth -0.5 a win. He has no swing and miss pitches. He doesn't throw quality enough strikes. Trash. Okay. And if Cole Young is not ready to be the second baseman, there is a 0% chance that Logan Evans, Michael Morales, Brandon Garcia are going to step in and give you what Luis Castillo gave you. Forget what you think of Castillo and whether or not he's worth the $24 million or not. Dude's going to give you 180 to 200 innings of high quality baseball. Is he an ace? No, the Mariners don't have one, and that's fine. There's only like 4 or 5 in baseball anyways. He's a very, very good pitcher who's been very durable for the Mariners, and you can't just replace him with league average, because either you have to go trade for that pitcher now, and now you're taking resources away from the offense still to go fix the pitching hole that you've created, or you're going to have to go from Luis Castillo, who at his lowest is like a low-end number 3, and you're going to have to replace him with a guy who at his best is a low-end number 5 from within your system. I don't like it. I don't get it. I don't think that the money you free up is actually going to do all that much to you and is actually going to make you better, because I look at what pitchers are getting out there in the free agent market right now. Taijuan Walker got $18 million a year ago. Like, Jamison Tyone got $19 million a few years ago. Like, those guys suck. Like, all due respect to Ty Walker, love the dude. He sucks. He got benched. He's not good. He's a number 4 starter that you just paid $18 million to.
Bro,
Castillo
bench
at
for Spencer
24.
Turnbull, dude. That's crazy.
Oh, I love Spencer Turnbull. He was on my off-season plan last winter. But
there you go.
But yeah, like what's the net like what gets you to the net positive, right? Is it just keeping your 5 guys, or is it trading one of your guys, just rolling with Brandon Garcia, Logan Evans, whatever, and whatever you get with that money you free up, or whatever you get via the trade, or both, whatever, right? Does that lead you to a more bigger net positive, whatever, right? Then just staying pat.
And that brings you to the point that you talked about. It's an incredibly like small needle to thread. Like, there is absolutely a scenario where you can trade him, get, roughly the equivalent of Castillo as a pitcher, still have some money left over to spend on a bat or whatever. But A, there's not a lot of bats out there. And B, pitching is incredibly expensive. Even average number 4 starters are incredibly expensive on the free agent market, and they're incredibly expensive in trade. I just don't see it. I don't see a path where you trade Castillo and you end up net positive on the deal. There's like I said, maybe there's a way out there. Maybe they figure it out, and if they do, build a statue. That's great. I don't see it. My bigger concern is not, hey, how do they get the bat? By trading one of the pitchers, it's how do they replace the pitcher they trade without going out and spending significant resources, either free agent or, trade assets to go and just replace the guy that you already had in your system. I'd rather just go get the bats. And one other thing, I just like to say, I reject the idea that the Mariners have to trade from their rotation to get better offensively. Of course they don't. Of course they don't. They can get better offensively. Again, the goal is not to be a juggernaut offensively. It's to be more consistently above average for 6 months. You do that, you're going to win 95 games. Imagine this Mariners team with the offense they had over the last 5 weeks. They win 100 games. We're talking about them playing in the World Series at that point if they had just an average offense. So I don't like the idea that you have to trade a pitcher to get better offensively. No, you don't. And also, I don't like the idea that, well, you just trade Castillo and you just replace him with Emerson Hancock. Dude's a scrub. You need to do a lot better. And better than that is going to cost you $15 million. Okay. Which is 60% of what you saved on Castillo if they take all the money. So no, I'm out. But to answer the question, if they do trade a guy, it'll be Castillo. Do I think they trade a guy? Probably not, but they might.
Right.
I mean,
with how
way to answer the question, but
with how trash you describe Emerson Hancock, though, they might not need to spend $15 million. I could just go out there and pitch for the Mariners, and I'd be better than Emerson Hancock.
I can replace Emerson Hancock in 5 minutes. Okay.
I have to stand up for our guy because he's our guy. So
you do that. Trash. Oh, 6 FIPS. Yeah, let's do it. Awesome. Woo. Sure. That's the starting rotation.
3.20 ERA for him next year. I'm locking it in.
3.20? Wow.
Look,
I told you I have to stand up for him, so I'm standing up for him.
Maybe an ERA minus.
I have
4 innings per game.
I spent $10 on an Emerson Hancock autograph card, so obviously I'm a secret fan of his.
Yeah. Joke's on you.
Is that part of the worthless endeavor that you have going on?
Oh, how
Jerry
the
DePoto draft binder, amateur acquisition binder. Gotcha. Yes, the one that Goldie doesn't know about.
Although, Colby, I will say you're right. You don't have to get better offensively by trading pitching. You don't even have to do it by trading prospects. You can do it by, signing good free agents. Oh, wait, I forgot. That's not a smart strategy, we were told. Yeah. So I forgot. So my bad.
Darn.
Not even soda.
Darn. We had it figured out. We almost solved world hunger, guys. We were so close.
Okay.
I actually do have the money. I just don't want to spend it.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Again, it's not a smart strategy, guys. Just get it through your head.
Yeah. I'm not broke. Please don't call me broke.
Okay. Mr. Trident, go ahead with answering the question.
Well, I'm glad Lyle made that point, because I was just going to say, why don't we just keep the great pitching we have and just go get some hitters on the free agent market? There we go. Simple. But no, I like going last year because I can piggyback off everybody's great points here. I think Castillo would be the most likely. I do not think a pitcher gets traded, and I'm not for it, honestly. There is scenarios where I think trading Castillo can make some sense. Like Colby said, he spend that money back, but it's like, one, I don't trust this team. They're not going to do that. They're just going to not spend the money and say, we're saving it for later and stuff like that. And also, trading, this is a team that I do think is trying to compete next year, trying to make a World Series. No fans don't want to hear that necessarily, but you're trading away a strength, and fine, you got offense, but it's like, and I know F4s and everything, but you trade Castillo and let's say he's worth 3.5 wins and you go get an offensive player that's also worth 3.5, 4 wins. I mean, sure, you're better offensively, but now you've taken a hit in your pitching staff. Also, let's say you do trade, again, Castillo's kind of the common name that comes up. Okay, fine. Now you've got, and right now, without, any additions, you look at your rotation, okay, Emerson Hancock. I'm not quite as down on him as Colby, but the point still stands. He's not very good. He's fine as he's got to make 3 or 4 starts a year as a spot starter, but I'm not putting him as my number 5. What if Brian Wu gets hurt again? What if Bryce Miller takes a little bit of a step back next year? It's possible. Now all of a sudden that rotation isn't that great. It's still good, but now you've made a strength worse, and fine, your offense is maybe a little bit better, but I don't think you have to trade MLB ready pitching for MLB ready hitting. I think you've got a great strength in this rotation. Use it and continue that to be a strength. I think if the offense can find a little more consistency, I even think the same offense you had last year, just not you know, I don't want to say a word I was going to say was going to be a bad word, but not, you know,
You're allowed
being
to
awful.
say bad words if you want.
Oh, are we?
Oh,
Okay.
I don't
No,
care.
an R-rated
Bad
podcast?
words.
Yeah,
It's not
I
you
don't
guys.
care.
My kids are sitting right behind me.
Oh,
Yeah, fair
We'll
enough.
say
so
him
it's
for you.
not-
How about that?
You have
But
headphones
being
in, right?
awful.
Everyone
Yeah,
else but Jay can if they would like.
okay. Yeah, you guys are fine. You're all in my headphones. So, but you know, not being the offense they were for the first few months of the season, just find that consistency. They would have been fine this season. I think the Colby made that point. Like you have that offense in September, not even have to be that good, but something more consistent over the course of the year. This is a 90-95 win team. I'm not saying don't make any additions. I hate the idea of taking your main strength and going, in order to get better, we've got to pull from that strength to pull up the bottom of the roster, essentially. And I mean, if you do have to make trades, you've got a great farm system to trade for. Ideally, you could go out and just sign hitters, but they're not going to do that outside of the, you know, sort of the secondary guys. But I am completely against trading anybody this rotation. I can stomach Castillo a little bit, but even then, I'm out on it. And you know, another point with Castillo, you know, he makes every start. I know missed the last few weeks this season. It's maybe not a great time to say that, but you got a workhorse on the mound as well. So I think you trade one of those guys, and all of a sudden, you know, yeah, maybe you can get somebody back in a trade. Maybe if you trade with Baltimore, maybe they throw Dean Kramer in on the back end or something, and fine, you've got a number 5 starter that's better than Emerson Hancock. But you're still, you know, like I said, Wu gets hurt, Miller steps back a little bit, and rotation all of a sudden is kind of like fine, but it's not the strength it is now. So I think Castillo's most likely. I don't think they make a trade, and I'm against it all the way. I love the staff. Keep it in place.
Okay, Lyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think they trade a starter either. To go along with the exercise, I'm going to be in the same boat as everybody else. If you had to trade somebody, I think Castillo makes the most sense. He's owed money. He's the oldest. He's not on the decline, but is his ceiling now as high as the other 4 in this rotation? No way. So if somebody were interested in a Luis Castillo trade for what was a package that got you back real impact on offense, yeah, I'd be all for it. If the Orioles said, we're interested in Luis Castillo and we would give you one of our third basemen for him, and the Mariners said, they said you have to eat half the contract. Great. Like I would do that. I would eat $12 million of Castillo's contract to go get Westberg or maybe even Kobe Mayo. But I don't really think that's going to happen. I don't know if Baltimore would be interested in that. And ultimately, I don't really think the Mariners would be interested in trading from their rotation. So I think if anybody were to get traded, it would be Castillo. But no, I don't think a trade's going to happen because this is the backbone of your team, which is also why I'm basically preparing for what's going to be maybe the most embarrassing offseason they've ever had, where they bring in Gio Urshela, Ahmed Rosario, and a reliever and say, well, this team was just about right on the brink as it is. Look at the great upgrades we made. Now we're set because guess what? Math, we got unlucky last year. Our one run luck's going to turn around in 25. And we're going to try and sell you on that. So yeah, I'm gearing up for what could be a really, really brutal offseason. But no, I don't think they trade one of the 5 starters.
Oh yeah. Okay, Colton, you're last up. Go ahead.
Similar to Colby, I reject the premise of the question.
Okay.
You forgot the signature sign.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't think they trade. I'll start it off here. I don't think they trade one. I think that Luis Castillo is most likely. However, right. The Seattle Mariners think it's a bad strategy to go out there and sign free agents, right? It's not part of their strategy. But also, I think free agent hitters kind of think it's a bad strategy to sign with Seattle. Like for their future, for their career. Hitters don't want to come here. They've seen what happens. Like time and time again, we have seen players either come here and regress, come here. And so certainly there are outliers, like Nelson Cruz is a good one, of course, but not everybody's Nelson Cruz. And I look at it as, like Ty said, a very fine thread or needle or whatever the hell you said, Ty, that the Mariners may not be able to go out there and sign the Willy Adames this offseason. A, they're not going to spend the money. B, why would Willy Adames ever want to come here? And so I look to the free agent market as a subsidiary way of them to go out there and maybe add guys on the fringes. But if they really want to go out there and make impact moves, they have to make a trade. And because that, Joe didn't say it, but just know that before this, when him and I were talking, he talked about trading George Kirby. He didn't mention it. He didn't mention it.
George Kirby to the Mets for Acuna's younger brother. All right, book it. That's what we're going with.
Okay. He is too afraid But at the same time, when Colby was talking about like Emerson Hancock or whoever being in that fifth starter role and how like your team is worse because of it, I look at it, and this is, I think, a good transition to our next question here, Jake, is look at the Tigers, right? Look at what they did. They have Tarek Skubal and they have Peter Montero or whoever else they want to throw out there, right? And they're making it work because they have the guys in the bullpen. And even, I mean, we've seen it with the Dodgers this postseason as well. Like, again, it's a long season. It's not the exact same thing in a long season because obviously you need guys to go out there and eat innings. But I think that there is a way where you can make it work by having Emerson Hancock as your 5 and then piggybacking him with maybe you have a long guy in your pen. I'm not saying it's a good idea. Rumor has it he's trash, but I think that it's possible. People are saying it's possible.
Say it's not a rumor, but okay.
Sure. If they were to trade one of, I think the guy you probably get the most for, oh gosh, it's tough. I want to say Logan's like the guy you get the most for, even though he has the least amount of control, sort of, kind of. But I look at it as he's proven he pitched over 200 innings this year. He had over 200 strikeouts. Like, he is clearly the best pitcher on this staff, in my opinion. You're probably going to get the most for Logan Gilbert. If the Mariners were to trade him, there is a line where all of a sudden you say yes. Like, if you are blown away by what you're offered, you are forced to say yes, because in the end, you just want this team to be better. I agree. Pitching is a strength. They should not trade from their pitching, but there is a trade that could come through that you have no choice but to say yes to. And in that case, you go from there. You say, oh, okay, well, we just traded Logan Gilbert, but we got X, Y, and Z back for the offense. And now let's go figure out. And again, it's a great like offseason for pitching. Like, the free agent market, there's some pretty solid guys out there on the free agent market. Not to say the Mariners should go out there and spend $30 million, whatever it's going to take to get Corbin Burns, but like, they can make up for getting rid of one of Logan Gilbert or something like that by adding somebody who is not nearly as good, of course, but it can work. So I don't know. There's a fine line the Mariners have to walk this offseason for their offense, because again, they're going to have to make trades, in my opinion. They're not going to be able to get guys to come here for anything. Honestly, I don't think you're gonna be able to sign free agents. So you're going to have to make trades somehow. And while I'd rather they do that with the prospects, I think that there's a chance that pitching is also involved.
Okay. So the Tigers question is actually not next, Colton. You were wrong.
Oh, I'm literally like trying to skip ahead. Dude. That's so embarrassing.
You're the producer of this, clearly. Okay, so we're gonna take a bit of a positivity break here. Although we don't know the final roster of the 2025 Mariners, what are some things that we are looking forward to for next season in this squad? And of course, we have to start this type of question out with Colby.
He's so affable.
King positivity. Let's go.
It just oozes out of me. Yeah, nothing. Everything is over. Like,
not even the J-Rod squad?
I mean, it's only on Tuesday and Friday. How does that help me? I live in Yakima. So what are things to look forward to? Obviously rotation, unless you're going to go with, Colton's stupid plan and trade Logan Gilbert. But the rotation is number one, obviously. Julio's still fun. Even bad Julio will do things that are really fun. Victor Robles is obviously, but I'm going to leave a lot of those like talking points on the table for you guys, because I actually have one that is way out of left field. One of the players I'm most excited to watch next year, believe it or not, Edward Bizardo. I know it's weird, but he was fantastic. He was fantastic down the stretch, and I think the Mariners might have figured something out with him. You look at his StatCast page, there's a lot of bright red here. The slider was absolutely filthy. He gets an extreme number of ground balls. He misses more than enough bats, and he was pretty good. They kept on inching him into more leverage situations throughout the year. And once he came back for the final time, which is up and down, he was really good. And he was right there with Snyder, honestly, in terms of just production, because Colin had some blowups. He did. And Bizardo, oddly enough, really didn't. And I was in the stadium when he was pitching against the Rangers, and they were up, 7-0 or whatever. And it took a great play from, was it Locklear playing first?
Yeah, it was Locklear.
It took a great play from Corey Seager not coming up representing the go-ahead run. But the dude gets a ton of ground balls. He gets a lot of swing and miss. He throws a lot of strikes now. I think the Mariners have figured something out here. And if Bizardo is even just a seventh inning guy, right? I'm saving $2 million because I don't have to bring back Thornton. I don't have to bring back Chargois. I don't have to bring back Voth, although I like Voth quite a bit too. But I saved that money, and it may not seem like a lot, like $1.5 million. Is that really that big of a deal? You tell me. I mean, who's the owner again? So yeah, because I want to give you guys the easier answers here, I'll take the guy way off the board. I'll take Bizzardo, but also since I'm going first, I'm going to stake my claim on Luke Raley. He's mine. So
Sure. Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
else pick somebody else.
Right.
But there
That's
you go.
my man.
Yes, that's right. Ain't nobody going to mess with my man. So
Joe literally looks like him. What do you mean?
Yeah,
Like,
you're
how can that not be Joe?
that is an excellent point.
That's true.
That is an
I
excellent
just need to
point.
get ripped and then we'll be fine.
I mean, not that ripped.
I mean, from where I'm at right now, it's a long journey to get to Luke Raley. I'm not going to sugarcoat
I think
it.
you could do it in an off season. I think you should buy a Luke Raley jersey, go
It
to
starts
opening day.
today.
That's right. Wear a full uniform
Stan
with
can
the Luke
save
Raley
so much
and see
money.
people ask you for pictures.
I literally said that as soon like when I started getting like I think it was Mariner Steve on Twitter who brought it up like in a live stream for the first time saying I look like Luke Raley. Immediately after that, I was like, yeah, I'll go buy a jersey. I'll go in full uniform. Colton's like, that's a little weird. I'm like, let's have some fun. You
Did I
said it
say
was
that?
weird. You said it was weird the first
I'm
time.
dressing
I
up
brought
as
it
Daniel Vogelbach and going, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Of course.
That tracks. That tracks.
Yeah, that tracks.
Okay.
But yeah,
Lyle,
there you go.
Lyle, we'll go next to you since you'll be seeing hopefully whatever you're excited for in person more than any of us will next year. So
Okay. I get told I look like Christian Yelich just to hop onto that train. So
Yeah,
I can see
Not a
it.
bad
Now-
one.
So then, by extent, you also look like Pete Davidson.
yeah. Oh, I get that one all the time too. So, yeah. Man.
He's not excited
that
for
was-
anything.
What's that?
Player
dude,
interviews, fan interviews.
Dude, I'm telling you, when I say
I'm
say
looking
this,
forward to asking George Curry his favorite 5 Fortnite dances.
Hell yeah.
yeah. Dude, when I say this season broke me, like it did, because I'm sitting here trying to like come up with positive. I'll think of a couple. Like, I can't wait for Matt Brash to get back. I know it's probably not going to be till June or maybe a little after, but the team obviously missed him dearly. I dearly missed watching him, and I would love to see him back on the field in 25, which he will be. So I'll say him. Full year of Randy Arozarena's gonna be nice, assuming he's still here. As Ty does,
There it
as
is.
Randy. Assuming he's still here. That would be good. Cal's always an easy one. Like, I hope if I see another, honestly, I'll up the stakes here because the Fox Sports MLB list that put out their top 10 catchers this year, we all know is a joke. If I see a single list this year that has the catchers out and has Cal anywhere below 5, we're throwing hands. So I would say Cal and Brash, like seeing Brash back on the field and just another season of Cal Raleigh, who's very, very clearly one of the game's elite catchers at this point and one of the backbones of this team. I would say them, and I can't wait to see what the prospects do in 2025 too, because we didn't get to see a lot of prospects really make an impact at the big league level in 24. We'll see how much of that happens in 25, but I think there will be more than 24 just between we expect to see Cole Young. At some point, we'll probably see Brandon Garcia or Logan Evans, guys like that. And then while they won't be in the big leagues, I'm excited to see how far Colt Emerson and Feldine Celestine and those guys can get in 25, because we're seeing what Colt's doing in the fall league. We assume if Feldine's healthy, he's going to be really, really good. So just to see those guys really get further on into affiliated ball and see how many steps they could take. I kind of went on a tangent here and I'm trying to list off
You're
some
good.
positives because I'm trying to block out the negatives. But yeah, okay. At the big league level, I'll say Brash and Cal. I can't wait for.
Okay. Fair enough. Joseph, your turn.
Don't let the dark thoughts consume your mind, Lyle. It's okay.
Yeah, I know.
I will say something that I'm looking forward to the most, and if it does happen, like it's not a guarantee that it'll happen, but the second base curse, I've said it a ton, that it needs to be broken through from a guy within the organization. No more going out and trading, no more signing free agents. Cole Young will break the curse that Robinson Cano left when he got traded. And second base will no longer be a black hole as soon as Cole Young makes his debut. So whether it's a delusional thing I'm looking forward to, because it's not going to happen, but it might happen. And so that's what I'm most excited for as far as like looking at like a singular player. I'd say Cole Young, like whenever he makes his debut, like that's going to be an exciting time. Second thing, if Humpy doesn't win a race in 2025, I'm willing to go tackle everybody, all the other salmon on the field to make sure Humpy gets a win. Like I will full on go out there and like Legion of Boom some of them to make sure that they don't. win and Humpy gets a
Ty
dub.
has no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, I
Don't
know
let
exactly
Joe
what you're
fool
talking
you. He only went to one game. Don't let Joe fool you.
But it's still sad that Humpy didn't win a single race. And who knows if Salmon Run also isn't back next year, and they didn't let Humpy get a single race.
We had to cut Humpy for Ahmed Rosario.
Sounds like Joe wants this guy to be the Mariners' new Grimace.
Hey, if it's working for the Grimace Mets into the National League Championship
The Humpy
Series,
Mariners.
the Humpy Mariners, bring it home, dude. I'm all in.
Okay,
Oh man.
we'll move on to Jay.
All right, so Lyle mentioned what I was going to mention about the prospects. It was kind of one of the frustrating things down the stretch for the Mariners I would talk about in my recaps is like, there was no like, hey, this guy's making his major league debut tomorrow to get excited about in September. So it was kind of frustrating. So I'm looking forward to the prospects being, a step closer to the big league level, or just one step further up. It's not a player, but I'm excited to see what Dan Wilson can do with a full offseason with these guys. Kind of, I think when you come in as an interim, well, not interim, but he kind of an interim basis as a manager, it's tough to implement things you want to do. You're kind of just carrying the wave a little bit of what was there before. So I'm curious and excited to see how Dan does with the guys with the full offseason. They seem to really like Dan Wilson. So I'm hoping that there's that buy-in and that there's just sort of that energy that he can bring to the table next year. So I'm excited for that. And the last thing is nothing to do necessarily with the team, but me and my wife are planning on doing a trip to Seattle next year for some games. So I'm very excited to maybe meet some of you guys and to be in the ballpark next year. So no matter what, there's nothing better than a day at the ballpark, no matter what the team's record is. So I'm very much looking forward to being back where I came from the Seattle area. So excited for that.
Nice. You'll have to let us know when you're going up there.
Absolutely.
Okay, Colton, your turn.
I mean, I'm really glad that we all stuck to one, so that everyone could say something different. Thanks, guys.
Shut up.
Like,
You got the hair. You don't get to complain.
Like,
No, I mean, prospects. When Joe and I were talking about what we were going to say before all this, prospects is kind of where I'm at. Like, I look to we've seen Jackson Merrill right in the playoffs so far. We saw Evan Carter, with the Rangers. The Mariners really haven't had that guy other than Julio in 2022. Like, he was that version, I guess. But at the same time, it's like these guys are making massive impacts, especially when we've seen what Jackson Merrill has been able to do over the past few weeks or so. The Mariners, I really want to see them have that guy. And could Cole Young be that guy? I don't know. But I would love to see Cole Young get an opportunity as long as they fill in the positions elsewhere, as long as third base is taken care of. Like, I don't want Cole Young and Josh to be in this lineup together ever. I think that like Jay said, is being at the ballpark, man. Like, there is nowhere that I'm happier than at the ballpark, truly. And like, the world could be on fire outside. I don't care. I'm at the ballpark, baby. You know what I mean? I don't care. And so I think that, and then one thing that Joe and I talked about was the outfield trio all being together for like an extended period of time. Julio, Randy / Ty, and Victor Robles all together for hopefully an entire season. Seeing what those three can do together, because we didn't really get it a whole lot in 2024, simply because of injuries, and obviously Randy getting traded for later on in the season, Victor showing up later as well. So if we can get it for an entire season, man, like, that could be some of the most electric and just downright fun moments of 2025. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Okay, so Colton wants the Wildfires to come back, so that's good to know.
Yeah,
We already had the Wildfire games a couple of years ago. You want those back,
out of
apparently.
pocket comment is
What
that,
was
dude?
that, dude? Okay. Okay, Ty, you can end it out.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Fires to not come back. I'll start there.
You guys are putting words in my mouth. This is
I'm
slanderous.
literally said
How on the
I'm
nose could you be?
I'm excited to see Kyle Tucker in a Mariners uniform, right, Lyle? Oh yeah, that's right.
When we
That's
get to
right.
trades later, I may or may not bring it up.
I'm excited.
So under
I'm
the
excited
radar.
to see who. I'm excited to see who Colby irrationally hates next year. There's always a new candidate for that.
Victor Robles is a good candidate. Just right
Cal,
off jump.
the Cal Raleigh hate is going to be crazy.
Never.
Or when you turn on Luke Rayleigh. Oh wow, that's like top 10 anime betrayals. I'm also excited for my Twitter mentions. They are definitely going to be normal. All right, so seriously, I mean, you guys kind of took all of them.
Bro, I literally
Um,
said a salmon run thing. Like, there's got to be something out there.
I mean, there are
Hot dogs from
exceptions.
heaven.
Yeah. I'm
What
excited.
song are they going to play during
I'm-
seventh inning
I'm,
stretch?
I'm excited for the hot dogs from heaven, the bobbleheads, and
None of which Ty will ever receive.
what was the other thing Mark from Maple Valley said?
Fireworks
the
and
fireworks?
bobbleheads.
Nights, yeah.
Fireworks. There we go.
Bobbleheads and
There we
hot
go.
dogs from heaven.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
excited for all those things. I'm excited to see what new pair of boots Jerry DePoto has.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, like, do I even need to say it? Randy, I'm doing the emote.
You're that
obviously
guy. Yeah, that's
full
right.
full season of Randy, obviously. Like, and hey, let's actually get him in the playoffs so we can see playoff Randy. That would be pretty cool.
Let's keep him on the team in 2025.
Well,
How
yeah,
about that?
let's start there. Let's start there, but then let's also, get him to the playoffs. That'd be great. That would be very rock and roll. Also Matt Brash, like you mentioned, Lyle, actually getting him back probably at the All-Star break, but man, if you get Matt Brash back and he's cooking for the second half of the season, yeah, buddy. So yeah, those two things for sure.
Nice. Okay. Second to last question. This is a viewer question. So seeing what the Tigers are doing with the small payroll, is there any validity to the people who say, why can't the Mariners do that too? And he's mainly talking about how they have a smaller payroll and are in the playoffs and we're not. And Mitchell did hypothesize he thinks it's because the Tigers have been getting higher draft picks for many years, leading to better prospects where we've been more in the middle of the pack. So we will start with Joseph on this one.
My Tigers I picked at the beginning of the year to win the AL Central. Who could have seen this coming?
You
Like,
didn't. You were wrong.
I was wrong. I mean, yeah, but
Fact check.
just saying they made the playoffs and we didn't, guys. So no, the meme is Colton and I are Squidward looking down on Patrick and SpongeBob having fun, like that meme, and those are the Tigers and the Royals having fun because we both picked them to win the AL Central. I don't think there's validity to it. I think there's there's definitely like the stroke of luck that kind of happens. Like, I think the best case scenario for wanting the team to spend more money happened with the championship series, specifically with the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Mets all advancing the championship series. I think that is, if you're wanting the team to spend more money, you're happy about that from like that perspective, regardless of whether or not you want the intolerable fan bases of the Yankees and the Dodgers to have some more stuff to kind of like rally for years on end. But for the Tigers, I mean, they got a really great year out of Riley Green. Obviously, they're going to have the American League Cy Young winner and Skubal. So I don't think it was like they were necessarily like this like unsung situation because a lot of the pieces were kind of there. Some of them fell off. Like Torkelson had a terrible year, but did come back up later in the year and like tried to help out in some capacity. But it was a lot of like plug and play, figuring it out. Great managing by AJ Hinch that I think allowed them to get hot at the right time and just kind of win with the power of friendship. I don't think that the Mariners necessarily have like the facilities for that big man kind of a situation. Like the Rays do it every year. Yet now we're like speaking on the Tigers because the Rays had a down year in that situation. So there's going to be a team every single year that has like a very low operating cost and wins a lot of games because like that's baseball. And I know that's baseball comment is going to it's a little people aren't very fond of that one, but I think that you look at even like the Diamondbacks in 23, they won 84 games and they made it into the postseason and they made it to the World Series. Like there's going to be a team every single year that has that kind of situation happen where they're probably not supposed to be there, but they are.
Okay. Colton, you can go ahead.
The short answer is no, there's no validity to it. I mean, when you look at the teams that were in the playoffs this year, the top 6 teams in payroll all made the playoffs this year. 5 of the teams in between 20 and 30 in payroll were also in the playoffs, but all of them are gone now, except for I think the Guardians. Yes, I think the Guardians were in the bottom third. You look at the teams that have won the World Series over the last X amount of years, they're usually in the top 5 to 10 in payroll. Like I'm not saying that spending money is the only answer. We have seen the Mets, for example, spend the most money in baseball and miss the playoffs. Like there are plenty of different reasons why that could happen, but for the Mariners specifically, it's the fact that they have never done it. Like they signed the Robinson Cano contract, and obviously You look at what was happening. I think that those teams it was poorly run. Jack Forensic sucks. Like, but you look at where they were going, they were putting the money on the field in Robinson Cano, Nelson Cruz, Felix Hernandez. They were spending the money. And in the end, that came back to bite them because Jack Forensic's bad at his job. But I think that in terms of how the money is allocated, it doesn't need to all be in top end guys. Like you have like Logan Gilbert's going to start making some money this year. Like, but it's not a ton. But Logan Gilbert's probably worth $20+ million a year easily, right? But you don't have to pay him that because hey, you got young guys. That is how dynasties are built. That's how the Astros were built over however many years. That's how the Braves were built, in my opinion. That you cycle through having a really good farm system and you begin to cycle guys in and out. The Astros, of course, we've seen it. Jeremy Pena comes up for Carlos Correa. They were able to throw Yordan in there, Kyle Tucker, etc. Like they have the ability to continue to cycle through guys as some guys start to leave. They also extend guys like Jose Altuve. And I think that because of that, there's a very clear blueprint onto how things should be run in terms of maybe don't be the Rockies. Like maybe don't go spend like however much money they spent on Chris Bryant, right? And then have him and don't Joe and have him, and then let Nolan Arenado walk. It doesn't make sense. Like there's a clear blueprint when it comes to the dynasty teams in baseball. Some are bought, like the Dodgers. They have clearly spent a ton of money, put the best guys out there on the field. But one way or another, you have to spend money. You more often than not are not going to get to the playoffs with a $19 million payroll or whatever the hell it was that the Tigers had this year. It's just not going to happen. And because of that, I don't think there's any validity to that statement.
Okay. Ahoy Benicio Tano, you're next. Ty, that's you.
he was zoned, bro.
Yeah,
I didn't hear Ahoy Benicio Tano. I heard
you're up next.
El Hoy de Santana, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
I was like, "Who
talking to?"
Carlos Santana.
Yeah, Carlos Santana. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Ahoy.
Every day.
Blah blah blah. Okay. So every day. Shut up. So yeah, I mean, like, look. As sports fans, we all try to look for like the one size fits all answer, the very comfortable answer, because it's easy, right? It's an easy pill to swallow. But that just isn't the case, especially with roster building in baseball. At the end of the day, go get good players and don't shut yourself off from any avenue that allows you to go get good players, right? That's really the thing behind wanting the Mariners to spend money. It's not even just because look, you can spend money and like Colton was saying, be the Rockies and just throw money out recklessly just for the sake of doing it, right? And I do think that there's fans out there that just want the Mariners to just do that no matter what. Like we need to have a $230 million payroll no matter what it looks like. Look, if you win the World Series with a $32 million payroll or a $230 million payroll, doesn't matter. You won the World Series. Great. Awesome. Love that. And as long as you're able to build a product that can do that again and again and again, or at least contend for that again and again and again, that's all that matters. But you cannot shut yourself off from any avenue to go out and get better. You can't have it, right? It's absolutely inexcusable. Doesn't mean that you have to then go down every avenue, but as long as you have those options available to you, that's what's most important. So yeah, look, there are different roster builds for every team that can work and not work, right? And the Mariners tried to approach things in the in the mid 2010s similar to how the Royals did. When they went to back-to-back World Series, and it didn't work out as well for the Mariners, right? Like it's just you're not like what works for one team might not work for the 29 others, right? So you just kind of have to find what works for you. And again, the name of the game is just get good baseball players, right? So yeah, I don't think there's any validity really to like should they approach things the way the Tigers do. I don't even know what was
it
the question
was more or less
specifically?
saying like because the Tigers have a small payroll and they made it to the playoffs and whatnot, whereas we didn't. So when people say why can't the Mariners be successful too, like the Tigers with who has a much smaller payroll than they do, that was basically the question.
Yeah, I mean, again, some of that is like I forget who mentioned it earlier. Like some of that is because you've had high draft picks. Some of it is just straight up luck, right? Like it just everything kind of has to fall into the right place, right? So again, there isn't a one size fits all answer to the problem here. Were the Mariners or did Jerry Dipoto and the front office fail in working with the money that they did have this offseason? Yes, absolutely, unequivocally. The only player that they acquired that worked out was Luke Raley, right? So yeah, we can absolutely address that, but in a much more broader term here, or more on a much more broader, or in a much more broader conversation here, what the Tigers did is very rare. It's a very, very tight window to fit through what they did. It's a great story, but that's not the ideal way to build your ball club, because again, it involves so many things going right, and you just can't bake on that on a year-to-year basis. You have to at least invest in your ball club to some degree financially.
Yep. Okay, we'll move on to Lyle.
Dude, when I tell you TJ and I were preying on the Tigers' downfall in these playoffs, we were preying on the Tigers' downfall in these playoffs because owners already have enough incentive as it is to do absolutely nothing. If these teams saw an $18 million payroll playoff roster make some run to the World Series, there would absolutely be owners across baseball that would see that and just in a nutshell say, well, we can start doing this. We don't have to pay anybody. We can run out a $20 million payroll and just win. In fact, my exact quote on one of our shows about a week ago when the Tigers started to have playoff success was, I have a vision right now of Chris Larson doing the gritty, seeing the Tigers win like this in the playoffs, because that is exactly the type of thing that owners need to see. It can be one small example like that for them to say, oh, well, we can just do that, because owners don't often think in a sound baseball manner. Most of them don't. The good ones do. But look, this is what drives me crazy at this point about like the Mariners refusing to not go after free agents. Because yeah, like to answer the question, just like straight on, that's not a sustainable product. Running one starter out there and then a bunch of bullpen games and also basically having 1.5 bats, one of them who's a platoon bat, that's not sustainable. There's a reason they lost. There's a reason they lost to another team that also doesn't spend a lot of money. And while they have a more sound roster in the Guardians, it's not the model I would build after either. So like, this is what drives me crazy about the Mariners not spending any money is TJ and I have talked about this a decent amount over the last couple weeks now, is the Mariners have tried every other avenue to get better offensively, and we're still here. They have tried signing mid-tier free agents. They've tried signing low-end free agents. They've tried trading for ascending players. They've tried trading for descending players. They've tried drafting and developing. And how many prospects have they really gotten out of that farm system to help offensively? Well, 2, at least in this core right now, 2. So here we still sit with an avalanche of offensive problems, and the one avenue they won't try is actually going and acquiring elite talent because they say that's not a good strategy. So that's what drives me crazy about how the Mariners are operating right now. And to the point of the Tigers, how many times are we really going to see this happen? Again, I think it's totally unsustainable, and we were rooting against it about as hard as possible because the more they won, I think the worse off it is for baseball. So yeah, I don't think this Tigers thing is real or sustainable.
Okay, we'll move on to Colby.
Yeah. Well, even though Lyle made terrific points, I'm going to undercut the smallest one just to make myself feel better. The Mariners have only produced 2 bats so far.
That's
Now,
true.
you got to remember that early on in the process, they were drafting a lot of pitching, and they nailed it. They nailed the pitching side. And now the early returns on the hitters look okay, at least in the minors. But obviously, I agree with everything else you're saying. This is bad. Like, there's an argument to be made that one of the worst things that ever happened to Major League Baseball is the book Moneyball, which is my favorite book. I read it at least once a year. Love the movie. I love the idea behind it. But it just gave these billionaires reasons to pinch pennies on the, $100 million that they're being asked to spend on their baseball team. Because they're like, well, look, you don't have to spend money to win. And they'll ignore the fact that the 3 teams with the highest payroll in baseball are all playing for the World Series, to go to the World Series next week. They'll ignore the fact that a team that was, I think, 6th in payroll won the World Series last year. Like, they'll ignore that to chase that one very specific way to try and win. And by the way, the team that's done it with the most success over the last decade has been the Tampa Bay Rays. They've only gotten to one World Series. They haven't even really gotten close since. And it was the COVID season World Series where Randy Arozarena was the best player on the planet for 2 weeks. Like, it's not a sustainable model. And when you look at the Tigers specifically, like, no disrespect to them, their run was incredible. Like, my hat's off to them. That's not a good roster. It's not. They have a couple good bullpen pieces. They have the best pitcher in the American League. That'll take you pretty far on its own. They have Riley Green. They have Kerry Carpenter, who against right-handed pitching is essentially Ketel Marte, Bryce Harper. Against left-handed pitching, he's essentially Dominic Canzone. So they have two pretty good hitters, right? And then they got a pretty decent year from Vierling. They got, they have a bunch of platoons that worked out, blah, blah, blah. It's not a sustainable model. And what it took for that Tigers team to make the playoffs, it took a Mariners collapse, it took a Royals collapse, and it took a Twins collapse. The Tigers just happened to be playing really good baseball in the last month of the season. And those three other teams, the Mariners in this case had already lost, even though they were starting to play good baseball. That 1-8 road trip basically sunk them, including the 5 of 6 they lost to the Tigers, pretty much sunk them. The Royals had to lose 7 in a row at the end of the year for that to become a race. The Twins, I think they went like 8-17 or something in the month of September. And the Tigers got in with 86 wins. That's not a sustainable, repeatable model. So the idea that the Tigers got in, so that makes it, the blueprint or whatever. No, because you don't really get to say this type of stuff when the Tigers got in ahead of you, largely on the backs of beating the crap out of you for a couple weeks. The Tigers got lucky. This is a build that got lucky. There was no shot, none, that the Tigers built this team to be a playoff team. It was an accident. They sold at the deadline. For most of this year, the Mariners had significantly higher playoff odds than the Tigers. The Tigers got hot. Good for them. They played their best baseball in the last few weeks while the Royals sucked, the Twins sucked, and the Mariners had dug themselves too big of a hole. This is not a sustainable model, and it's bad for baseball that teams would look at this and say, yeah, we'll just do that. And, you look at the teams who do this, purposefully and are pretty good at it, and they have runs of success. You look at a team like the Guardians, you look at the team like the Rays. What has it won them in the grand scheme of things? Nothing. Really nothing. Nothing of significance. So, it's just not a sustainable model. It sucks. And I don't get why, as Mariner fans, now I don't think this is Mariner fans. This is definitely Mariners ownership. But Mariners fans should be, if you're looking for a model to emulate, as annoying as it is, it's the Houston Astros, who went to 7 straight ALCSs. They spent money, but they also drafted, they developed, they knew when to let guys go, they knew when to trade guys, and they extended a few guys, right? That's the model. If you want a different team because you refuse to compare yourself to the Astros, even though they're literally who you should be comparing yourself against, the Atlanta Braves, who traded for a bunch of guys, extended pretty much all of them, and that's where they spent their money. The Braves didn't spend huge in free agency. They traded for guys because they had a loaded up farm system, kind of like the Mariners do right now, and then they extended them. Those are the models that you should be following, and neither one of those models really spends a ton in free agency. The Astros don't spend a ton in free agency. The Braves don't spend a ton in free agency. They spend a ton, but not necessarily in free agency. The Dodgers, before this last offseason, they didn't spend a ton in free agency. And then they went out and they handed up $1 billion to 2 guys and kind of flipped that mode on its head. But the Dodgers were built through trade. The Dodgers were built through draft and develop. But the Dodgers also spend money. And when the time is right and when they feel like they're in their window, they'll absolutely go and spend money. And that's the difference between the Mariners and the Dodgers, the Mariners and the Astros. The Mariners are in their window right now. No question about it. And ownership won't go spend the money to put them over the top, which is the things the Astros did, which is what the Braves do, which is what, the Yankees do. It's what the great teams do. When they're in range and they feel like they're in their window, they'll spend a little more than maybe even they're comfortable with, and they know they'll reap the benefits of it afterwards. And then maybe you have to drop payroll a little bit for a couple of years before you get back to that spot, but that's fine. So yeah, the Tigers got lucky, and my hat's off to them. Great run. It is not a sustainable model. It is not, a model that anybody should be trying to emulate. because it doesn't work. It's not repeatable enough. Like the two or three teams that can do it, they're the unicorns in this league. Everybody else who's trying to do it, they're the Pittsburgh Pirates. Whoop-de-doo. So yeah, no, saying like, oh, the Tigers didn't spend, so is it really necessary that the Mariners do? Yeah, because the Tigers got lucky.
Okay, move on to Jay.
Yeah, I was rooting against the Tigers' downfall because they were one of the reasons the Mariners didn't get in the playoffs this year. All the one-run wins they killed us with, along with the other issues as well. But I'm kind of salty. Like, I hate the Tigers. I don't care if the Angels were a 100-loss team. I hate everything about the Angels right now. So, but no, I mean, like, sure, fine. Yeah, I mean, if the Tigers can do it, can the Mariners do it? Yeah, I mean, Mariners could cut payroll next year and win because Julio could have an MVP season. So could Cal. Rotation's great and bullpen bounces back. Like, sure. But again, to everybody's point, it's not sustainable to be doing it that way. It doesn't mean it can't happen. Nothing's ever 0 or 100%, especially in the sports world. But yeah, it's not a sustainable model to continue winning. And to everybody's point here, just to piggyback that everybody made great points, but there's multiple ways to do it. I think Colby hit the nail on the head talking about the free agency to put this team over the top. They are in their window right now. I don't want the team to build off free agency. In fact, look at the Tigers. I mean, who's the most expensive player on that team? It's Javi Baez. I mean, is he still on the team? But like Javi Baez, an awful free agent contract, which still drives me nuts that he hit that home run off Munoz. But anyways, the Rockies with Chris Bryant, Trevor Story in Boston, there are definitely free agent landmines. And I'm not ever going to come on and say Mariners just need to spend just to spend, and who cares who it is, give out money. But when you've got a team, in my opinion, the Mariners that are knocking on the door, I still believe this team can win a World Series. If you told me, like, Jay, next year the Mariners win the World Series, I'd be shocked just as a fan and what we've been through. But roster-wise, I really would not be completely shocked that this team is doing that. I think they're capable. But I think they need to use the free agency market to help push them over the top. I think there's guys there that can really bring this thing home where you don't have to do a lot of the trades. They've got to that point. I think through the way they've done it's been correct, but I think they need to use the free agent market to kind of push themselves over the top here, essentially. And it's just something they just don't seem to be willing to do outside of more of the supplemental pieces, which are fine. You need those guys. The AJ Pollocks, when they're right, can help you as a platoon bat, but that can't be like your answer in free agency, essentially. So no, I don't think it's a sustainable thing. I'm with everybody here. I think the Tigers, I listen, if any Tigers fans are watching this, I congratulations, great season. I might get ripped for this. I think the Mariners are a better team than the Tigers, honestly. I think if you put them together tomorrow, I would predict the Mariners to win the series. Baseball's weird, things happen. But no, I don't think it's a sustainable model to use. And like I said, only a couple teams have done it, Rays, Guardians, and even those teams don't have the World Series rings to show for it. So yeah, no, it can happen, it can work, but it's not something that I'd rely on.
Okay. We'll run into our last question here. Who is our under the radar trade target this offseason? So we can go real nutty with it here. We'll start with Jay and we'll go from there.
A name that there's a bunch of names. I'll throw one out there, and I don't even know where it would necessarily work position wise. I really like the Nico Horner idea. Cut back on the strikeouts a little bit. Great defensive player. Good offensive player as well. Not necessarily the most amazing guy, but bat to ball skills are there. I think in T-Mobile, I'm not crazy about like, oh my gosh, they strike out so much. I think you can still be a good offense and strike out. The record for strikeouts was the 2023 Twins, which were like 5th in WRC plus. But I do think in this ballpark, it can help a little bit, put that on ball. I think Horner's the guy that can help that. I think they had some interest in him a little bit in a trade. I don't have the insights to it. I don't know. Maybe it was just fans talking about it, but we know Jerry Ty's talked about it a lot, likes to circle back to guys. So that would be a name I'd throw out. I don't want to mention anymore. I've got a few others, but I will keep it to one, I'm sure. So I'll go Nico Horner. I know it's tough because you got JP at short, so I'm not sure the logistics there, how that would work out. I don't know if Horner can play second, maybe. JP actually seemed like he took a little bit of a step up defensively this year. His defensive numbers were better. I don't know if that's something that's, Perry Hill related, JP related, we'll see. But Nico Horner would be the name that I'd keep an eye on.
Okay, we'll move on to Colton.
So I don't want to throw a trade package out there because I have one package that Joe and I were talking about that would get me laughed out of here. So we're not going to talk about that.
You have to
Um,
mention it now.
But then,
no,
just
now
say
you
it
have
like
to do
that.
it.
You have to
Such
say
an
it.
easy joke in there.
Yeah,
Such an easy joke.
I'm
say
sorry.
it, say it, Colby.
Oh, you don't want to throw your package out there. It sounds like your Tinder game.
You're not far off, actually.
You got the hair though, man. That's half the battle.
As we all know, when your package arrives, your package has arrived.
you're darn right.
That's
I love
that's a deep
Thanksgiving.
cut. Hey, Canadian Thanksgiving on Monday. I love Thanksgiving.
I'm lost.
That's
at this point.
that's for the Locked On Mariners OGs.
That's
out
from
there.
the OG
Oh,
lockdown.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Like
A guy,
two of you will get that.
a guy that I think makes a lot of sense is Luis Garcia. From the Nationals, strikes out about 17% of the time. Put up a career year, had a 115 OPS plus in 2024. He's in 5 years, about 465 games, a career 270, 302, 410 guy. Hit 18 home runs this year randomly. His career high before that was 9. Hit 18 this year, just kind of out of nowhere. Only 24 years old. Plays second base for you. You'd have him for the next, I think, 3 or 4 years. I don't know. This is a guy that makes sense. I don't know what the trade package would look like for a guy like that. I don't know what the Nationals would be looking for, and frankly, if they'd even be willing to move on from him. But for the right price, he's not a big like power guy. He doesn't hit the ball hard. He's right around league average, but he's a guy who doesn't strike out a lot, and I think fits the lineup for the Mariners. And you can put him at second base, and I think that he'll be better than Jorge Polanco there. So that's kind of where I'm at with that trade package.
Okay, Joseph, go ahead.
I've kind of like been fumbling around with names. I started with like a Jonathan India at second base, just like revisiting that one. That's not really under the radar though. Just like in the fact that like it's like to kind of circle back like that conversation again. But I mean, he did have a good year. It kind of like rose to the occasion when the Reds needed him to due to injuries and like Marte getting suspended, etc. Like 248 average, 357 OBP, 392 slug. Like it's not great, but a 108 WRC plus, like doesn't play great defense. But like as far as like a second baseman that is going to get paid, like is going to get paid like $4 million next year, 4.4, I believe. Like it's not the worst thing I've ever heard of. It's just, it's going to be one that if it does kind of culminate, people are like, why didn't you do that last year? Or one, you're just going to get him on a down year. And then it's just going to be, he's going to get laughed out of T-Mobile. Like it just feels like a situation where if you do make that trade after you've talked about it for 3 years running, like you made the trade too late, like you kind of ran out of time. And maybe that's a similar situation like with Polanco. Like they talked about wanting him for a while and then they kind of ran out of time and got him like on the downswing. So not to say that like trading for India before 2023 would have been any better because like a 98 WRC plus like was only 1.5, like worth 1.5 wins, but put up almost a 3-win season according to F4 last year. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he can put up 2 wins and you'd be okay at second base with India. So it's not under the radar, I wouldn't say, but I could see it happening.
Okay, we'll move on to Colby.
Okay.
He's got so many.
Pull up the Rolodex,
Also, Colby, we need to respect the paywall here because we got our off-season plan
that's part of the
coming out this
problem.
weekend.
Off-season plan comes out on Monday. Well, Ty and I will swap our off-season plans. Shameless
Yeah.
plug.
This won't be out until
No.
next weekend, so it's up to you.
Okay.
It still won't be public. It still won't be public until after the World
Yep.
or around the World, whenever.
Yeah, it's
we're
not going
doing
out
it.
for like the. So,
Yeah.
but obviously Ty and I are swapping off-season plans on Monday, and then we'll call each other idiots for the next 6 shows, and then we'll throw out something that looks nothing like either of ours right around the World Series. So, you know, trying to not give too much of that away, but also, you know, for the last 3 weeks, I have been looking at fan graphs every single day, like, hey, how about this guy? And then being like, no, you're stupid. Like, no, that guy doesn't work. Like, and it's really easy to talk yourself into a bunch of guys and talk yourself out of a bunch of guys. So there are dozens of names here that I've looked at and said, nope, just nope. And so I'll just give you the name I thought of today as a guy who could be available. Isn't going to be super exciting, but I think you'd be pretty shocked if he got traded. And that's Andres Jimenez of the Cleveland Guardians, second baseman. Jimenez is a guy who has really struggled at the plate this year. Last year, he was okay. In 2022, we thought he was a superstar, and that's when he got this big extension. He hasn't been able to repeat that, but he is the best defensive player in the American League, according to the folks who decide the Gold Glove. And as we know, they are infallible. He won the Platinum Glove last year, but StatCast has him as a 100th percentile defender. He is an elite second baseman defensively. So at the very least, I am upgrading at second base defensively, like into the stratosphere over Polanco. A run saved is the same thing as a run scored. And I'm hoping I can get the bat closer to something between 23 and 22. Why would the Guardians trade him? Well, we just talked about the Guardians. They are a model that is turn and burn. That is pay these guys until they start to make a little too much money and then sell them right away and then just bring up the next guy. And Jimenez's contract is going to drop from like 5 million, what it was this year, to 10 million ish next year, maybe closer to 11. And then after that, it jumps to 15 for about 4 or 5 years. So, do I think the Guardians are likely going to trade him this winter? No, but if he was on like the Padres or maybe not the Padres have their own payroll issues, but if he was on like, the Mets, we wouldn't even be talking about this. Like, no, I mean, they're going to house that and he's not going to be available because despite the poor bat, he's still a 3.5, 4 win player at second base. But it's the Guardians and they do things a little differently. So maybe, just maybe he's available. I thought of him too late to really come up with a trade package, but needless to say, it would be pretty hefty. And there is another big bat in Cleveland that makes more sense and would be more affordable, but obviously he's not very much under the radar. I don't know if anybody's going to say him, so I don't want to. I was just thinking about Andres Jimenez today. I think he'd be pretty interesting. I think he might be surprisingly available this winter. Hey, if you go get Jose Ramirez, that'd be my number one, but you can't. So let's shift focus here. And Jimenez is a pretty good player who, at the very least, brings plenty of contact. He's going to steal a lot of bags for you, and he's going to play elite defense. And it's only going to cost you $10, $15 million for the next 5 or 6 years. And he can move to shortstop once JP leaves. Like, I think Jimenez is an interesting player who might be available. And so he's under the radar, I would say.
Okay. We'll move on to Ty.
So yeah, like Colby, because we've been doing a lot of preparation for the offseason plan, I've gone through tons of names. And I have tons of names on a list. I'll just throw out someone that we talked about on our show a couple days ago, Willie Castro, the utility man for the Twins. The reason why I bring him up is multiple factors here. One, the Twins are looking to sell. They're not going to add payroll most likely this winter. He's only got 1 year left. He is projected to make, I believe, $6.7 million in arbitration. And he gives you a lot of different options. He can act kind of as a fail-safe. He can act as an answer to at least one of your needs. Because he is truly a super utility. He can play second well. He can play third well. His bat isn't going to profile particularly well at third because he doesn't hit for a ton of power, but he is going to play the position well, and he is going to give you at least some offensive value out of there. And if you got him early in the offseason, like you got him in your back pocket, right? So you can still go out and you get your third baseman. You can go out and still get your second baseman, or you can get both, and now you just have this really good utility player, right? I don't think it would cost a ton. I mean, maybe it's like 2 guys in the Logan Evans range of prospects. Maybe it's 1 guy in that range, and then maybe like the Jeter Martinez or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I don't think it's going to cost you anything prohibitive necessarily. That is, if he is available, of course, but I think there's a decent chance he is because of the Twins situation right now. But again, yeah, you can play quite a few spots really well. He can also play in the outfield if you want him to. And since he got to Minnesota a couple of years ago, he's kind of revitalized his bat. He's kind of figured things out offensively. He's been about a 1-0. I think he's been 108 WRC plus each of the last 2 years. Might be wrong on that, give or take a couple points. He'll steal some bags. Yeah, he's just a solid all-around player that, again, gives you a lot of different options and gives you a ton of flexibility with building your roster out.
Okay, move on to Lyle.
Well, he couldn't be here tonight, so I'll make his presence felt. It's time to trade back for Abe. We need a second baseman. Time to go get Abe Toro. All right, no, not actually though.
Homage to TJ.
A little bit. I mean, it's not a perfect option, but Jake Berger at a 900 OPS in the second half. Now his defense is so bad. So
yeah,
he's
like a third baseman in name.
Yeah. So I was going to say maybe to DH if you're really going to make Garver the backup catcher. That doesn't give you a lot of roster flexibility, but I'm just trying to think about any possible way to make the offense better. Could be one. Marlins obviously aren't winning. They're probably okay trading him.
Mhm.
So you need offense. Maybe he could play first base. You shift him over there, but you're looking for offense and you're looking for somebody that's actually under the radar and not Kyle Tucker. I would say Jake Berger.
Okay, very cool. Okay, well, that was the end of my questions. So I appreciate everyone for sticking through 2 hours now of talking about this stuff.